Hey everybody, Delando Dyer once again. Coming back with the Proverbs series, and this time we're picking up where we left off in Proverbs chapter 6, which I tentatively called Loan, Laziness, and More Lust. Yes, the three L's that we're trying to avoid in life. So we're going to break it down. We'll start with verse 1, and I'm not going to belay the time, but I'm just going to get straight into it. So here we go. Verse 1, the dangers of co-signing. Well, actually, verses 1 and 2. My son, if you have become surety for your neighbor, have given a pledge for a stranger, if you have been snared with the words of your mouth, have been caught with the words of your mouth. Now, to give you a biblical perspective, to become surety meant the following: to put oneself up as collateral for another's debt. Now, to default or to fail to pay that loan back result in one or two options. One, either you had to pay that loan back in full, or A, you pay the loan back in full, or B, you would become that servant. You would become a servant to the one you owe the money to in order to work off your debt. Now, to also know to give a pledge was like how we say in modern times that your word was your bond. If you told someone that you were going to pay them back, they took that seriously. So therefore, a pledge was not to be given lightly, nor was it to be taken lightly. But let's look at verses 3 through 5 of how to get out of that type of debt. Verses 3 through 5. Do this then, my son, and deliver yourself, since you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, humble yourself and importune your neighbor. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hunter's hand, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Now, if Solomon thought that not being a guarantor was wise and made getting out of this role an urgent matter, how much more as believers today should we be adamant about not deliberately going into a loan just nonchalantly, or if we are in loans, to fight like this, like our life depends on it, to get out of those loans and to pay off those debts as soon as possible. Now, we've talked about this before about debts, so I won't go into that into more details. So we'll move on to the next section, which is to not be a lazy man. And this is going to be verses 6 through 11. Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which, having no chief, officer, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man. Now, not passing up teaching moments, Solomon told his son to observe one of God's smallest creations in order to prove and illustrate a point. Now, the ant, although smaller, was one of the more harder working creatures, because the ant would work and continuously seek after and bring food into the colony in order for them to have food for the harvest. So when they could not go outside of that hill or that colony, they were able to have the food for their survival and for their nourishment and sustainment. Now, if ants can do that and prepare, how much more should we as believers do the same and be prepared for the things that are to come down the future that we can't see, or at least as much as possible? Now, the issue of laziness is not about, oh, well, I'm not allowed to sleep. No, that's not the case. There's nothing wrong with resting. On the other hand, verse 9 does call the person a sluggard. Now, in the Hebrew, that word sluggard is astel, which means slothful, lazy, and as the opposite of one who is a hard worker. Now, let's look at verses 12 through 15, which I'll entitle, Do Not Be a Wicked Man. Starting at verse 12. A worthless person, a wicked man, is the one who walks with a perverse mouth, who winks with his eyes, who signals with his feet, who points with his fingers, who with perversity in his heart continually devises evil, who spreads strife. Therefore his calamity will come suddenly. Instantly he will be broken, and there will be no healing. Now, in this case, the term worthless in the Hebrew is the word Belial, which means a man of Belial, and Belial was one of the chief false gods in the ancient Near Eastern times that was worshipped and reverenced. And it's the opposite of true worship, because you're worshiping something that can't walk, can't talk, can't see, therefore it is worthless. So anyone who worshipped something worthless would be by proxy worthless as well, because you're putting all your time and energy into something that's never giving you any benefits, not even in the remote sense temporary, and definitely not in the future there in your life after this life is over. So when you're talking about verse 14, he talks about a summation of all the verbal and nonverbal attributes and descriptions that were made in this chapter. And that is, simply put, that his heart is always geared towards evil. Now, what are the results of these things when your heart is continuously towards evil? Well, look no further than verse 15. Calamity or distress will come, being broken without healing. Now, for another reference to that, we can look at Isaiah 30, chapter 30, verses 12 through 14. And just give you a summation of it. This talks about when Israel put their trust in their alliance with Egypt instead of their reliance on God. And when you read that, you'll see the results of what happened when they put their trust in someone or the might of a nation rather than the mighty, mighty God. Next section, what does the Lord hate? Verses 16 through 19. There are 6 things which the Lord hates, yes, 7 which are abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among brothers. Now, just going through these, abominations make God sick to his stomach. And to look at some passages that you can, actually, I'll give the passages to you. You can look at them on your own time. And we'll look at those in later chapters in this Proverbs series. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 8, chapter 16, verse 5, and chapter 21, verse 27. Now, to give you a little synopsis on the traits that Solomon was describing, was displaying through the descriptions. Haughty eyes. Now, let me be clear. God sees the intent of our non-verbals. So even if you never typed it, wrote it, verbally said it, God knows what's in our hearts. Again, for another reference, you can see Psalm 101, verse 5. And then we have the lying tongue, speaking falsehood knowingly. We also have the hands that shed innocent blood, aka committing acts of murder. Also, our heart. Remember, Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. We talked about as far as what's in one's heart is what we treasure. I'm sorry, that's in the New Testament. Actually, let me go to Proverbs 4:23 real quick. Proverbs 4:23. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life. Actually, I'll read verse 24 as well. Put away from you a deceitful mouth, and put devious speech far from you. Verse 25. Let your eyes look directly ahead, and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. Verse 26 and 27. Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right nor to the left. Turn your foot from evil. Now, excuse me. Next up, a false witness. Now, this is a violation of the 9th commandment, and you can see Exodus 20, verse 16 for that reference. Also, spreading strife. To be clear, spreading strife is not even close. It's the exact opposite of one speaking the truth in love. It's also the opposite of confronting evil. To spread strife is to spread evil. To give you a case example of that, do you remember when Paul confronted Peter to his face and publicly, might I add, for Peter causing many believers to stumble because, on one hand, he was eating with non Gentiles, but when a group of Gentiles came along, Peter got up and separated himself. And that caused confusion even among the believing Gentiles or the believing Jews. And you can see Galatians chapter 2, verses 11 through 14 for a recap of that. Excuse me. Sorry. Next up, hold tight to godly wisdom and instruction. And we'll look at verses 20 through 23 for those. My son, observe the commandment of your father, and do not forsake the teaching of your mother. Bind them continually on your heart, tie them around your neck. When you walk about, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will talk to you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the teaching is light, and reproofs for discipline are the way of life. Now, he redirects his son back to godly wisdom once again, like in Proverbs chapter 3. Next up, do not fall for the immoral woman, verses 24 through 26. To keep you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress, do not desire her beauty in your heart, nor let her capture you with her eyelids. For on account of a harlot, one is reduced to a loaf of bread, and an adulteress hunts for the precious life. Now, the importance of keeping godly wisdom was for his son, in this case from father to son, was for his son to be on the lookout for this type of woman as being described. Now, another principle we can draw from this is, especially for us as men, think before you're being drawn away by someone's physical appearance, physical beauty. Verse 25. Now, is this to say that a woman should not be attractive? Absolutely not. Or should not make themselves appear, as far as beautiful and presentable? No, that's not the case. Now, a lot of times it's as men, our mindset. Are we looking at somebody with lust? Are we looking at somebody as someone that God has created? But we're gonna respect boundaries and not let our minds take us where it should not go. Now, it's one thing if someone is naturally attracted and you're attracted to her. Okay, if you are single, that person's single, and if Lord willing, you get the opportunity to get to know this person. I'm talking about knowledge-wise, know this person, and if that's someone that the Lord leads you to marry, cool. But if your mind is going somewhere else and it has nothing to do with marriage, then we both know that this is leading to sexual immorality. And we all know where that leads. It leads us further away from God, and it leads us closer and closer into a sinful lifestyle, which we've explained in many of these chapters. None of these have good endings. None of them do. And even through the forgiveness, it doesn't mean that it does not have, even with God's forgiveness, it does not mean that there are no consequences as a result of going down that road. But I digress for now. And verse 26 is another clear warning that the adulteress or harlot will ruin the life of the one who pursues her. It's like the prey going towards the predator, and they don't even know that they're the prey. Last but not least, and we'll close this chapter out with these verses through 27 through 35, adultery will always cost you. Excuse me. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Or can a man walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is the one who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her will not go unpunished. Men do not despise a thief if he steals, to satisfy himself when he is hungry. But when he is found, he must repay sevenfold. He must give all the substance of his house. The one who commits adultery with a woman is lacking sense. He who would destroy himself does it. Wounds and disgrace he will find, and his reproach will not be blotted out. For jealousy enrages a man, and he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not accept any ransom, nor will he be satisfied, though you give many gifts. Now, just as in verses 27 and 28 shows inevitable pain, hence taking fire to your person, and you feel the effects of that. Verse 29 has the same result with adultery. It leaves scars. It leaves reminders of what was done, and believe me, it doesn't go without reproach. Verses 30 and 31. There is some level of empathy if there's a genuine need. That's going back to if a person steals. Stealing is wrong. Don't get it twisted. But at least in that context, they understood, okay, if this person's hungry and they're doing that, there's some level of empathy. However, because that is against the law, if you are caught doing those things, you will pay sevenfold. And it's going to cost you financially, because if you are broke already trying to steal, imagine having to pay back whatever the value is times 7, and you're already broke. But then look at what happens when someone commits adultery. So if a man is sleeping with another man's wife, or a woman, in this case that's the context, or a woman steps out of the covenant with her husband and sleeps with another man who's not her husband, that there's no money in the world that's going to fix that. There's no money that's going to fix that betrayal. There's no money that's going to make up for that betrayal. There's no gifts from a jewelry store that can fix that, because you've broken something that goes way beyond stuff that could be given with money, and that's a person's heart. And in verses 32 through 35, there is no sympathy for the man who commits adultery. And think about what we talked about in Proverbs chapter 5. And if you go back and look at that, you'll see some of the consequences that were discussed in this. Now, consequences are inevitable. And unless a man draws from God to forgive the offender, a man's jealousy can be fatal to the adulterer and or the adulteress. And there have been many cases where, actually there's one recent case, believe the woman's name is Tyra Crosby, at least from the stories that are going on right now, where she walked into her home, saw another woman, and I'm not saying they were in intimacy or any type of compromising position, if you will, and she found her husband and this other woman in the house. And unfortunately, the woman, in this case, the wife, took that young lady's life. And she is currently awaiting her court date. And I believe she was charged with, I want to say, manslaughter. If I'm wrong on that, I'll stand corrected on that, or I'll put a description and a link as far as with the news report, just so I can correct that error. But I don't know if that woman was in an intimate relationship with that man, so I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying that when men pursue someone that's not their wives, and then you bring that woman into your own home or the home of you and your wife, that's a very, very compromising situation. And unfortunately, it cost that young girl her life. And it seems it's going to cost the wife her life as she knows it. Because if she's found guilty, she may spend the rest of her living life in prison because of her rage and how she went about the situation. And then the husband, unfortunately, is no better, because he put his wife in a position where she wilded out and raged out, and then put a young lady in a position where I'm pretty sure she didn't imagine that when she stepped into that house, she was not coming home. So let's be in prayer, please, that we walk in wisdom and that we avoid those temptations and ask for discernment so that we know that we're not walking into a trap like a prey stepping into a predator's territory. But until next time, we'll go to Proverbs chapter 7. Please take these words and just look at the scripture passages and just meditate and reflect on those things. And if you have any questions regarding anything that's been talked about today, please leave a comment in the comments section. Please share this with anybody who wants biblical, godly material. And on that note, I'm out.
I'm living that Christ life, that right life, that holy life, a God-fearing life, because I want to have eternal life. See, that double life is the wrong life. It brings a lot of strife, then you find yourself living that hell life.